Welcome to the V2V podcast, episode number 20. Today I'm talking with Tracy Dick about caves, snails, and bananas. Welcome to the show. Hello.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So these are three things that people wouldn't naturally kind of associate with each other: caves, snails, and bananas.
Correct.
So,
but there are always banana slugs, which I think people tend to think of a lot when thinking of slugs, because they're very common.
And not only that, but back in the mid-'80s, the University of California in Santa Cruz adopted the banana slug as their mascot.
Bless them. That's wonderful.
Yeah, they don't have,
SoCal.
at the time they didn't have any sports team. They may have added badminton, perhaps, but they didn't have a mascot. Like UCLA is a bear, and I don't know what the other mascots are in the University of California system are generally, but so it was voted on by the student that banana slug would be their mascot because they're quite ubiquitous in the area, in the coastal section of California there in Santa Cruz. So yes,
and Santa Cruz is Central California, coastal.
Santa Cruz is like northern California. That's the thing.
Okay. Mhm.
It's below San Francisco.
I know there was
near the redwoods, I believe.
I know there was a project going on with the Natural History Museum down in SoCal called the Slime Project, where they had a thing called the Snail Blitz going on, and there's an app that you can take photos of different plant and animal life and send it in, and it'll tell you a little more about it. And they were trying to find some more sinistral snails, which is kind of like a left-coiled snail, like the equivalent to a left-handed snail, where the snail...
Are they from down under?
Well, we have snails and slugs all over the place, but these particular snails, we're trying to pass on this sinistrality, the left-handed characteristic in this slug, because it's kind of like a reproductive, isolative type thing, and it almost automatically, if they were to breed, they would kind of automatically create a new species of slug just right then and there, which we don't really see a lot of that instant evolution kind of thing. So it was a big deal for them to try to find another left-coiled snail to breed with so that they could kind of witness that evolution happen right there in front of their eyes. They're very, very diverse. The gastropods are kind of mollusk, and mollusks kind of appeared in about 540 million years ago during the Cambrian period. And
it's a long time ago.
It is a long time ago. The gastropod is a kind of mollusk, and snails and slugs make up 80% of that classified species, and mollusks themselves make up about 1/4 of all marine organisms that we know of, including cephalopods and squids, which are the most neurologically developed of all marine life, and again, very diverse. So they're all over the place, in the ocean and on land, and some that can live in both places.
Right. Some snails and slugs have lungs, and some have gills. And that's interesting.
It is interesting. And another thing on that is that because it's so diverse and they can do so many different things, you'll find marine slugs and snails with lungs, and you'll find terrestrial snails and slugs with gills, which is kind of counterintuitive, but it happens. There are a few different, there are three kind of characteristics that qualify something as a gastropod, or actually a mollusk too.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to do with their mantle having a big enough cavity to breathe, so to have lungs or the gills to take air in and also produce their secretions. And then they are going to have the radula, which is kind of the equivalent to the tongue, and then also a nervous system. So as long as they have those three things, the mantle with the cavity that's good for breathing and secretions, and the radula, which is like a tongue, and a nervous system, then they can be a mollusk. And everything else from there, I mean, you're going to have all sorts of crazy different characteristics.
Right. So what's interesting, I just kind of found out today, is that these gastropods, they all can be called snails.
I love a snail.
Although snails without shells are slugs, and I didn't know this at all. Gastropods that can't withdraw into their shells are called limpets.
Love it. Also, sometimes known as semi-snails, which is they have so many fun little features, and it varies from species to species. And so I mentioned the radula earlier, which is kind of like the equivalent of a tongue, but something special about them is that they're covered in teeth. They don't really chew. They more like scrape and slice, but some of them are split, like how you've seen humans with the spliced tongue, the body modification rage of the late 90s, early 2000s. Familiar?
Right.
Some of them have the two, and some of them just have one, and some of them have like bendable teeth that bend with the tongue, and some of them, the tongue is also the tooth. It's like its own thing, and it really depends on what environment that snail lives in, or slug, and what is the most abundant thing to eat. That will determine what their radula looks like. And it's kind of made up of a material. It's you're gonna have to edit this, buddy. I'm doing my best.
Oh no, we can fill in the gaps with all kinds of interesting information and filler, like
I'm gonna go
what
into
I'm doing right now.
Cool.
I'm sure you're gonna tell us something very interesting about the snail mouth.
The radula, yes. They're made of a long chain polymer that's derived of glucose, and it's the primary component of cells that you're going to see in the walls of like fungus and insect wings and fish scales, and even a little cephalopod beak, which is fun because that's also kind of the gastropod, but a mollusk. Right. And this material, it's awesome. And they eat on some pretty interesting things, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the predatory marine snails.
Oh my gosh. This sounds going to get scary a little bit.
It is, definitely.
I'm like a little bit nervous.
Yeah, so
these predatory marine snails.
One of them, it uses its radula and an acidic secretion to bore through the shell of the prey.
No.
And yes, it's really quite something to see. And we have other kinds that use their tongues as like little venomous harpoons.
What?
And yep. And then the nudibranch is a little bit, it's still a gastropod, but it's not quite the same as like your traditional marine slug. It will feed on coral reef and actually suck the life and the poison out of it, which it's immune to it, but it'll store it in its body so that if one of its predators comes along, it'll taste bad and it will spit it out. And not be
this
into
guy,
it.
he extracts the poison from another creature, stores it,
But he also,
and
he stores it, but he also uses the nutrients from it. So it doesn't hurt him. It's like his, you know, his magic ability.
Right, he's got a little like magic bag of tricks that
yes.
don't, and then did the other animals at some point realize like, oh, don't eat that guy. He's got a little poison pouch. Wow.
That's one method, but they actually have a lot of different defense mechanisms that they've evolved over the years. And color, as you were speaking earlier, before we started recording about the camouflage that different mollusks use.
Oh, right.
We were also talking about the cave snail. And
the cave snail, I'm looking at it right now. That's so crazy.
Yeah, I would love to hear some more about the cave snail.
Now, like what
how in the world do they even find this
animal, like a cave-dwelling animal, typically be called troglofauna. Troglo being the scientific word for cave, or
yes, like a troglodyte, someone who might live in a someone who is enthusiastic about living in a cave.
A troglobite is a permanent cave dweller, not a dite, a bite. Troglobite. Troglodyte would be like a caveman type.
Okay.
But we're
might
talking
sleep
about
in there and eat in there, but I'm not a salamander who's been here.
Right. So we're talking about this microscopic cave snail. It's not actually microscopic. It's about 2 millimeters tall. It's very tiny.
Yeah, and then
and about 1 millimeter wide, and has 5 to 6 whorls with a cone on top, which is that's all very cool. But he's also completely translucent, like his shell and his body.
Snail guts.
The shell, you can totally see the guts. I'm looking at the picture right now, which I will put up on the video of our little friend Zospium thalassum, and he can be found incredibly deep under the ground, like half a mile to a mile under the ground in the cave systems in Croatia.
Yeah,
and he's completely blind. This guy's like totally blind. Lives kind of in the mud, like the muddy banks of the like cave ponds and whatnot, and just kind of floats around, and we're not even sure what he eats.
Snail thing. Yeah, probably some sort of microalgae, you'd think, but it'd have to be pretty small for their small little mouths. Right.
They have obviously a very limited food supply and are extremely energy efficient. Thus, they don't move around a lot, but they eat.
That's right. They're slow little fellows.
They eat rotten twigs, leaves, bacteria.
I did want to mention something about snails. I know that there's sometimes a misconception that they move shells as they.
A delicacy for them. Go ahead.
Oh yes, delicious. That snails do not switch shells. That's a hermit crab thing. They find them and they're not their shells, but snail shells grow with snails.
That is true. That is true. Yes.
And your little feller there, the Croatian cave dwelling, what was it? Zospium
thalassum. Yes.
Thalassum. Yes. Is also blind as a bat.
Bigger name, right? We mentioned that. His name is bigger than the snail, actually. You wouldn't. He sounds like a big name, but it's a tiny snail.
So I was reading that snails, though they can't. This guy can't see. Most of them can see if they don't live in a cave. They can't hear. They don't have ears. But going back to the nudibranches, I found a study by a guy who says that they emit a sound, which I thought was really fascinating.
Oh, wow.
You can Yeah. He says it kind of sounds like a watch, and it comes out of their mouth, and you can see their mouth move, and they make like a little ticking sound, and if you had one in your apartment, you could hear it from 12 feet away.
What are they saying?
It's like the equivalent of a whale song in gastropoda. It's fascinating, though. And the nudibranchs, not only are they super cute, but they have more symmetry to them, which the typical snails, externally at least, they do not have that same symmetry.
No, they're pretty asymmetrical, except when it comes to their buddies, the slugs, who
delightful.
are pretty symmetrical, generally. Just one long tube of a little guy.
That's my experience as well with the slug friends, the shellless snails, if you will.
Some slugs have shells, by the way. They look like they're usually really tiny, and they just kind of sit on their back like a little hat.
Kind of, that's beautiful. I would like to see more of that.
I think I will find, maybe I'll find some pictures of little shelled slugs and include them along with.
I think that's a great idea.
Because, how cute would that be?
The cutest. Almost as cute as what we've been seeing lately. I know it's kind of been making this little viral reruns around the internet right now, the African land snail that people seem to be really enthusiastic about. But don't hear a lot about the Syrinx Aurelius. Sorry, not quite sure what's that pronunciation, but they can get up to 35 inches and up to 40 pounds.
That's a big snail.
It is, and they are marine snail, and it's kind of interesting in some of the indigenous tribes in Queensland, Australia, will use a part of its shell called the imina as a nose pin. It's kind of a half moon shaped nose pin for the septum, and the men there will use it. And throughout human history, shelled gastropoda have been really integral to different industries. So non-industrialized tribes will use the shells as currency. And then, of course, we have the more developed use of pearls as jewelry and mother of pearl, of course. And then there's also something called, which I actually just learned about today, called sea milk, which is a kind of fabric that's harvested from a Mediterranean gastropoda and used for like really highfalutin things like gloves and like kid gloves and that sort of thing. Yeah. So, and then of course the classic French cuisine escargot, in which a nice little buttery wine sauce with some mushrooms and fresh bread, tasty snack.
I think snails just don't get enough credit. Like,
no,
they're slow moving, but they're far from boring.
No, they're definitely not boring.
They're glowing snails.
Like a bioluminescence.
There are armored snails. Some snails have really lavish shells, like kind of what you were talking about regarding jewelry. Of course, the transparent snails that we were discussing are little cave dweller guys.
Yes, little ghostly cave snails.
Even snails that can kill you.
Ooh.
There was some article that I came across, I forget where, but some kid ate a slug and became paralyzed because of neurotoxin in the slug. So, kind of going along the lines of we were talking about before about
parasites.
Right.
This is interesting. So the brain on a slug or snail is actually wrapped around its esophagus. It's a kind of a funny place for it. But sometimes they will become infested with a parasite, which is actually more common than not in snails. But the snail and the parasite are more symbiotic. The main function of the parasite being okay with the snail living in it is that when a predator eats the snail, which is going to be like a a salamander, a frog, or a mouse, or a rat, they're kind of more their predators, and some birds, then that animal will become infected and inhibited by the parasite. So
Wow.
lots to look out on. There are certain toxicities that have been used in neurological research even. So, I mean, they're spicy little animalia we've got on our hands with they really are.
Very spicy. You know what we might be doing by talking about these guys is, and get ready for it, we may in fact be rustling some Jimmy right now.
I think you might be right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
I actually
there may be people who are like, oh no, you're talking about like gross snails. They're eating like tomatoes. But I'm sure, there's, but so, and that may be true.
Snail.
That may be true. But there are many snails, and some snails are definitely our friends.
Oh, indeed.
But as you said, you're not opposed to eating them too. Like, if the right snail comes along with a little butter and wine sauce.
Yes, an escargot. Delicious. I have actually had it, and the restaurant that served it, called Milford, the Fish House, has recently closed down, so I'm unfortunately not going to be able to have that anytime soon. I don't think anywhere else I've seen it anywhere else on the menus.
It's definitely a delicacy for sure.
We know that those ones are safe, but I do just kind of want to throw a little disclaimer out here is that you just can't go around eating any snail or slug that you find because they do have unpredictable parasites and toxicity that you are probably not going to, unless you're like a malacologist kind of person that studies these, you're not probably going to want to try that out at home.
No, it's kind of like going around the forest and eating random mushrooms. Not a good idea.
Yeah, you don't do it.
So, we mentioned caves because of our little translucent cave guy. He's the coolest, I think. And of course, we're talking about gastropods, snails, and slugs specifically, but we haven't really approached the other topic, which is bananas. Now, and the reason it comes up is because snails generally are omnivores. They like, there are carnivorous snails. There are snails that like fresh fruit and leaves. There are snails that like rotten stuff.
There are
kind of
actually
everything
also,
in between.
I do just want to mention the cannibalistic nudie branches that do exist as well, because these guys, very few limits to what they're capable of. But yes, continue.
You've got to give them credit for sure.
Oh yeah, they're underrated. Absolutely.
So you were mentioning earlier the giant African land snail, and
yes.
In some of my research, I was, for whatever reason, the topic just came up, these three things. And I started looking for a snail that lives in a cave that eats bananas. And the African land snail kind of meets all those requirements. Like, they don't generally live in caves, but they could, and I'm sure that some do. They are indeed snails. The biggest snails, they can live up to 10 years, and they are quite large.
I've seen I love that photo that's kind of been going around of the snail in the person's hand. It just looks like the sweetest little pet.
Yeah, they're really awesome, and they can be up to 8 inches long, and they weigh about an ounce. So it's a hefty snail.
It is a heavy snail.
So, and then voila, I found footage of a giant African land snail, perhaps coming out of a cave, perhaps not, eating bananas.
Banana, yes.
Bananas.
And so Bananas are a good snack for an omnivorous snail. They have a lot of nutrients. They're all over the place, all sorts of different kinds of bananas everywhere. Maybe not everywhere, but where snails are, there will be bananas
they
sometimes.
do indeed exist together.
Intersectional. Somebody has a pet snail, and by the time that it had grown, quadrupled in size, it had gotten out of its enclosure and started eating this guy's banana tree.
Oh wow! So you've got like anecdotal evidence too. That's amazing.
And so that's not in nature. But the thing with snails is that they are and slugs is that they are highly adaptive, and the rendula is going to kind of model itself after whatever is the most abundant. So if you had two sinistral / left-handed snails and you fed them nothing but bananas, pretty soon you are going to have a new species. You're going to have a snail that is going to produce more sinistral snail offspring, which is usually in the form of eggs. And I'd be interested to see what a snail's mouth and kind of tooth-covered tongue would turn out to look like after a few years of eating just bananas.
Right. But you know what? We can't.
And put it in a cave. And
we can't do it here, though, in the United States. At least not. Well,
you know where you have a lot of caves?
I'm bouncing back to, for whatever reason, I'm bouncing back from the giant African land snail. But those are, they're actually illegal. Like, because that would be the one to do it with. Like,
is it like a poached thing? It's kind of like a. Well, see, I think that in theory, if we were gonna kind of do a full experiment, it'd be fun to take snails from all over the place and see what happens if you could find two sinistral snails. And gender doesn't matter because they have both sets of sexual organs, so they you don't have to worry about that.
I think
whether or not they like each
fun.
other. Might be something you take into consideration.
They might eat each other.
Yeah, they might not like each other.
Yeah.
But
and that would be
saying
like
they do. Saying you do, and you have like a cool little lab where you have your contained environments for each sinistral snail. Because what we're trying to do here is create cave-dwelling snails that eat bananas. And maybe they're left-handed, and maybe there's no light here, and maybe we can actually evolve a snail to be a left-handed banana-eating snail that has a translucent shell. So we keep it in the dark, feed it nothing but bananas, and introduce it only to other sinistral snails. And I mean, you could experiment all day long, but definitely not condoning that. This is all hypothetical. I'm not super into animal testing myself.
I don't know if I'm in the condone your snail eugenics program here. It just sounds like.
I'm just saying, in theory, it would work. Because
it would work.
I'm not trying to, change the finch population in the Galapagos Islands or anything like that. It's just that, in theory, the way that they work, the traits that they pass on and how quickly they'll do it if the genes are right and the timing is right and the environment and everything is kind of right, you're going to get a reproductive isolation, and it's going to quickly it's a quick way to create a new species, really.
Sure. You're not advocating to like pull a switcheroo on all the finches on the Galapagos and change their islands around so they can't eat. Like the small beaked finches are have big holes to get their food out of, and then the long beaked finches, their beaks are too pointy to grab the bugs off the ground or something. No, I get it.
No, I'm not trying to play God. I'm not trying to play Darwin. Good. I'm not trying to play finch swap. I just like the idea that they are kind of an adaptive and diverse wonder of this planet, and you're going to find them everywhere, and they're They're really underrated. I know that some people out there do have snail and slug phobias, and it's probably because you have an asshole older brother or something that tortured you. If you could look past that and maybe try to look at them in a new light, learn a thing or two from the snails, I think you'd probably be better for it in the long run.
Right.
Save our snails, you know?
SOS. Save our snails. And give, you know what? Give a snail a banana every once in a while. And
give a snail a banana.
And
take it
show
to a cave. If anybody
cave.
lives in the Midwest or in the Ozark region, there are over 5,000 caves. I'm not saying you should just wander into any cave aimlessly, but there are some that you can even drive through. The only one that I know that you can drive through in North America is called Fantastic Caverns in Springfield, Missouri. And the prices back in the late 90s were very affordable. Take your family. It's about 50 degrees in there, so bring a light jacket. But enjoy the cave. Yeah.
Do you know that a cave? You know that a cave is defined as a hole big enough for a person to go into?
Well, that really just opens up so many possibilities on your hike next time you go.
Sure. Explore a cave safely. Bring a friend. Don't go alone.
Don't go alone. If you've ever read any Mark Twain, Missouri fellow, he writes about caves a lot in his books, and the Civil War, a lot of times people would hide out in caves, and there's just endless history and mystery in caves.
Oh, it's a whole new world like that we're discovering like all the time.
All your little salamanders and your bats.
The crystal caves in Mexico that you can't go into because you'll die.
Underwater caves that are like in the ocean but have fresh water flowing through them. What is that?
That's amazing. It's incredible. I bet there's snails down there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we already know about the tumbling. Well, we know about the little ghostly Croatian snail. But have we talked about the Tumbling Creek snail yet? Or
no. We have not talked about the tumbling. What a great name for a snail.
You know, I agree, and I would like to know if the Tumbling Creek snail does what the Croatian cave snail does, is that it kind of passively gets moved along by the streams of the water. You'd think that might be something that goes on, because they're not going very fast on their own. Yeah.
Right. He could just tumble around. In the tumbling creek.
Their shells are made out of calcium carbonate. Carbonate, if I'm not mistaken. Just
carbonate.
Hold
on a second. Pause here. Hold on. Carbonate.
Calcium.
Is different than carbonate. Carbonite isn't a thing. Carbonite is what Han Solo was frozen in.
Like ectoplasm?
So that would be really cool if the snail shell was made out of carbonite.
We should look it up because I don't.
I'm looking it up right now.
I don't want to say the wrong thing. Okay. I might have it written down as well, but it's the kind of thing I should have.
Quick look up.
Should have also done a disclaimer. We're not experts, but we're enthusiasts. So our knowledge is approximate on some things. We can't. I'm not going to tell you to write a paper on this based on what I say, but feel free to fact check. Let me know what you come up with.
Okay. Carbonate is a salt of carbonic acid, H2CO3. So two hydrogen atoms, the carbon atom, and 3 oxygen atoms, and that creates a carbonate. And they are yes, you can make a snail shell out of that stuff for sure.
All right.
Carbonite,
on
the other hand.
Carbonite. See, I have calcium carbonite written down. So this is something that our listeners are gonna, or maybe do a small follow-up. Let us know.
Oh, okay. So carbonite. Carbonite is an explosive. It's a coal mining explosive.
Which, if we were in a mine, we're basically in a cave, and there might be snails there.
Carbonite ion is an inorganic anion that forms conjugate base of dihydromethylidene with a chemical formula of CO2 Wow,
LaCroix.
that's really complicated. Carbonite
Yes.
is an online backup service also.
Oh yes, I've heard about this Carbonite. I've heard Carbonite referenced by sponsors for bigger podcasts with sponsorship. So I mean, if
this
we needed,
V2V podcast is not sponsored by Carbonite.
we're not going to sponsor it for free. But if you know anybody that's interested in sponsoring us, I wouldn't be surprised.
Carbonite is also a fictional substance from Star Wars, most notably used to imprison Han Solo in
indeed.
The Empire Strikes Back. Do you say Han Solo or do you say Han Solo?
I say Han.
Yeah, me too.
Because
It seems
in
cooler.
Spanish and in Japanese and in Hawaiian, the A makes an ah sound, A-E-O-E. So since it's a land,
Lando.
not ours, I kind of apply a more general vowel. More
So you have Han Solo,
more
but then his buddy
static.
is Lando, though, not Londo.
Lando
Calrissian. She's Lando, though. But I've heard both. I think both are acceptable.
You have a vowel at the end of Lando, and so that is going to absorb or dictate the sound of the second vowel, the A, to give it the softer, or the harder, rather, in this case, the Lando. In
Spanish, though, in Spanish, how
it could be Lando.
You would say it Lando.
Lando
Calrissian.
It's fine. I mean, really, the name sounds great both ways. Lando.
Yeah. And Han Solo.
Han Solo. Han,
Sure.
I mean, it kind of sounds like ham, which is fun because I did want to bring up this. We were talking about how to classify a mollusk, and it had these kind of three vague things that were static, and there are even irregularities with that when it comes to certain mollusks that live on thermal ventilators in the deep ocean. But an acronym that is used to depict the characteristics in like textbooks and stuff, it's HAM, which stands for hypothetical ancestral mollusk, which is
It's kind of amazing.
It is, yeah.
How did we get there? That's
it's all
incredible
about
that we were
you kind of gotta flip it and reverse it. You gotta bring it back around, make the circle.
Oh, by the way, when you're exploring caves in southwestern Missouri,
yes,
you will in fact probably not see a tumbling creek snail, but they'll be there. They're very
are they
tiny.
that small?
They're smaller than the other one.
The Croatian ghostly cave snail?
And then his Croatian cousin.
Are they translucent?
Oh, they're about the same size, I guess. No, they're white.
Oh,
they're
okay.
2 millimeters, 2 millimeters wide and about 1 millimeter tall. So yeah, they're about the same size, but they're also blind. Mm-hmm. Small, conical, well-rounded, and pale yellow. They're white.
And how many whorls do they have? A whorl is external coil that
they have an average of 3.5 whorls as opposed to.
Okay, so it's a little bit smaller than the Croatian
snail. A little bit
smaller.
It doesn't have a nice dome on top either, like the Croatian guy, which maybe is Cyrillic. You think?
It does have to do with age too, because the size and the whorls are going to influence its age, or rather, its age will influence the size of its whorls.
He's a troglobite. He lives in caves. Yeah, that's pretty great. He's an aquatic troglobite, and he's a little dude. He's blind. He kind of rolls, or he tumbles, actually.
He tumbles, yeah. And now, you were mentioning earlier something about bats, and I think we're kind of at this point now where we're trying to determine if the bat just picks the snail up and moves it, or if it eats it and then poops it out, and that's kind of how it gets around like a seed would with a bird or a bat.
I think they're so small that they're accidentally picked up.
Yeah,
And,
okay, kind of like
probably
trace.
probably often eaten, again, probably accidentally, but
Because if they can seal themselves up, you think that they'd be safe with their calcium carbonate shell against the acidity of the guano.
True.
Depending on its region and diet.
So,
but they get around, they do.
Another very interesting thing about bats is that bats can develop a fungus on their nose called white nose.
I've heard about this. It's a very East Coast thing, like Maine and upstate New York, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. But getting back, going like almost full circle again, back to bananas, there's a
fruit bat?
There's a bacteria that lives in bananas that eats that fungus and cures white nose.
Amazing. Kind of like a nice little symbiotic, holistic approach.
Well, it is interesting because bats don't eat bananas. Like they don't really care about bananas whatsoever. But bananas saved the bats.
I know that bananas are. It's dangerous when we get on the what are they called? The Cavendish? No.
Cavendish?
Cavendish.
Those are the common ones, right?
Yes,
those are the ones
the
that
ones
everyone
where when we do the like mono farming, like, and we are more in danger when we grow like that. And talking about farming and the banana culture and everything, and why people get all, people are very divided about genetically modified fruits because some people think it doesn't matter, and some people think they don't understand the agricultural and cultural implications of farming and how it's dangerous to have only one kind of something because it can become infested with insects or fungi or any number of things, and then it gets spread through the whole crop, and then they all die, and then there's no farm season, and people don't get to work, and they don't get money, and it's all just this kind of like strange, invisible culture to the masses. And bananas themselves are kind of a mystery because some people, I really like watching the videos online where like the super duper creationalists kind of talk about
not that
the
guy.
perfect fruit being the banana, and it's like, buddy, have you ever read a book ever that was like not the Bible or something? No offense to anybody in there.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about, and
it's kind of like, look at this perfect piece of fruit made by God. It's like, buddy, no, that's not how it happens. You got to check it out.
Kent Hovind is his name.
They're okay.
Partnered up with our buddy.
Sounds like someone that would hang out with Ken Ham. Back to Ham again.
Oh, back to where do we come from? Oh, Ham, right?
There was a ham. It's
You're about to go ham on that one.
A food that there's a movie that has been appropriated, a Hans Christian Andersen movie appropriated by
Hans again.
I'm sure you've all heard of it, but Hans. Quite close. Hans. Yes, and see there you have your
the callback to Mr. Solo.
Kind of, but they're not from the same place.
No, they're not. One is from a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, whereas Hans Christian Andersen, I think, is, I'm going to get this wrong, Danish? English? Is he from the Netherlands,
German?
like Hieronymus Bosch? Sure, that sounds good. Let's stick, because Hans, it's very Germanic, yes. Okay, you would know. Okay,
I don't know, but you know what? You know what I have? I have the power of the internet. He's Danish.
Beautiful. I was right the first time. Imagine.
It's the Anderson is what gets you there. Yeah.
So, well, I like this adaptation by Hayao Miyazaki. It's called Ponyo. I'm sure you've all seen it. The American version has Tina Fey as the mom of the child who finds Ponyo, who is the equivalent of the Little Mermaid, only for a portion is kind of represented as a little fish, and he feeds her ham in one of the scenes, and she kind of reminds me of a nudie branch because she's just this little, not quite sluggish, but not quite fish, a little bit of human facing, extra cute, kind of anthropomorphized beyond, and just so cute. When Ponyo eats ham, I'm just telling you folks, if you haven't seen it, there you go. Small tangents. Yes,
it all is a part of this whole thing that we're doing. I'm fascinated.
Everything is connected.
I hope that everyone else is listening.
You can connect anything with ease if you just sit down for a few minutes and draw some lines, connect some dots.
Right.
It's all interconnected. That's the magic of being an earthling, conscious here. It's a really good time. You can throw your television away and never watch it again, never be bored if you can just hang out and connect dots.
And listen to the V2V podcast with Aurelius and our guest today, Tracy Dick, talking about caves, snails, caves, and bananas, and bats, and Han Solo.
In no particular order, but I promise you, it's all connected, man.
It's all connected. And
so other people.
I think we're going to wrap it up.
Indeed.
Because I don't know if I could even go on any further without getting into subjects like octopi. Go ahead.
Goodness, we can't talk about octopuses right now.
I said octopi. That's so horrible. That's not even a word.
You know, colloquially it is accepted, but it is not it's not on the forefront of the scientific terminology when we're talking about the collective octopuses.
But I can't say cacti though, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that is the word. But
before we wrap it up, I did want to leave a small little tale that I thought was kind of fun.
Oh, please do.
We were talking about the African land snail, and we were talking about the 35-inch, 40-pound Australian marine snail, and I really wanted to mention my favorite large snail that, it was my favorite, and now I have a little kind of mixed feelings on it. It's the 40-foot pink snail from the 1967 film Dr. Dolittle. Unfortunately, at this time in the Caribbean, the locals of the village where they were filming had just kind of gotten over an illness, a gastrointestinal illness that had been caused by freshwater snails. And then here comes this giant 40-foot snail, kind of like an insulting reminder to their ailment. And so they threw rocks at it. And after the filming, they took it out into the Caribbean and they sunk it. But part of it washed back up into these mangroves. And 50 years later, one of the people that was a kid, a 3-year-old actually, when it was being filmed, went on a little journey, and he went and found it in the mangrove, and he brought it back to one of the local restaurants, and there the fiberglass snail shell portion hangs on the wall of the restaurant called Doolittle's in Santa Lucia. So
that's incredible.
Maybe if you ever end up there and you see a giant fiberglass snail shell on the wall, you know the story.
That's a good story.
Thanks.
I'm glad it wasn't a real snail. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Yeah. But if you've ever seen the movie, which is long, it is worth watching. The interior is just, you can't get better than 1967 interior design, folks. So check it out.
That's true. That's a different podcast altogether, though.
Indeed,
but we should pursue that 1960s interior design. It's worth it.
Oh yeah, just watch Columbo. Christ. All right, so Slugs is another thing I wanted to plug. It's a book by David Greenberg, illustrated by Victoria Chast. Amazing children's book. We're going to put some links down in the show notes for you so that you can follow up, because the world is behind on their education of snails and slugs, and we're trying to bring you up to pace because we care about you and we care about SOS, saving our snails and slugs.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe and give us a like if you like.
Okay, bye, folks.